So we've been doing this series of webinars since for the last month or so to make sure that everyone has all the information they need about the different file types. And the reason we combined this one with the kind of final update one was because there have been some changes at Amazon and a couple of other vendors that we wanted to go over to make sure that everybody is aligned with what needs to be happening. So oh, there we go. I'm sure you all know by now, eBound is a small but mighty team of 4 people, and we represent 81 publishers across Canada and are a registered not-for-profit. We do work in a few different pillars, including ebook creation, distribution and marketing, and then what this last pillar is, what we're doing here today: education, research, accessibility, advocacy. So anything that helps the publishing community as a whole. Most of you know me. I think I recognize most of the names. I'm Emma. I'm the technology specialist. I've been with eBound for about 4.5 years now. I'm a graduate of the Centennial College Publishing Program, and I worked at Kobo previously. So a big supporter of digital books and, of course, accessibility because they go hand in hand. So the agenda for this session, we're going to review kind of reflowable format features and some common errors that I see anecdotally helping process, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of titles a year at eBound, even in accessible files. So I thought it would be good to go over some of those design features that can be avoided. I will bake a couple of question periods in case there's some discussion around some of the things that are said. And we'll go over in detail the accessible metadata that you should add for your reflowable ePubs and some new vendor updates requirements, and then ways of assessing your reflowable backlist and a good plan for moving forward with titles and making sure that your workflow is up to date. And then again, another question period in case anything comes up. So as I'm sure you all know, the EAA is happening very soon. June 28th is when the European Accessibility Act takes effect, which is in our realm of publishing and eBound's realm of digital publishing. We are referring to reflowable ePubs that Canada has already had the mandate to create things as born accessible. So we've already been doing this work for a long time, and now we're making sure that the accessibility metadata is accurate and up to date and being sent. So previously we went over fixed layout and web PDF formats, and just as a reminder, they should be made as accessible as possible. And any and all Onyx accessible features should be added in your metadata. And we'll go over that in detail shortly. So in case anyone wants a little refresher, what is a reflowable ePub? So all that means is that the text can be resized and therefore reflow. So that's why they call it reflowable. And there's really just the two main formats. There are some kind of niche other formats like enhanced ePubs with audio and things like that. But when it comes to ePubs, it's kind of those two camps: fixed layout for things like comic books and academic texts that need that specific layout, and then reflowable for literally everything else. With reflowable accessible ePubs, we're talking specifically about this acronym here. So ePubs meeting WCAG standards and ePub accessibility specifications. So essentially there's a few different standards that come into play. And while the EAA isn't necessarily saying you must meet this particular standard, that is where they're drawing from. So the easiest thing to do is to make sure that the ePubs are created to the highest standards so that you are covered no matter what. And again, a reminder that the only kind of ePub that can be made fully accessible is reflowable right now. They haven't yet found a way to make a fixed layout fully accessible. So that's why this is still the only way. If you aren't 100% sure what the titles are, because sometimes they can get uploaded incorrectly into CoreSource, You can double check with your conversion partner because they would be able to open the EPUB for you and let you know. You'll notice that a lot of this comes back to make sure you're working with a certified or accredited or credible conversion partner, and that you also have a good understanding of what creates an accessible EPUB, what's needed. For a long time, when we've done this work, I've tried to find shortcuts around, oh, well, maybe I can give this cheat sheet or that cheat sheet or a checklist. And unfortunately, it's such a complex space and it's always evolving. So really the only cheat sheet is to continue to educate yourself, because you need to be able to look at the ePubs and assess what's in them. And again, just this quick pitch for why we're opting for Reflowable. I have a couple of things to show you here. At the end of the day, this is what I always tell publishers is, if I'm lucky enough to chat with them kind of at the beginning of the process of them creating the ebook, or even better, at the beginning of them creating the print book, is the reader is their right as a digital ebook reader is to change your design anyway. So if the author or the designer is feeling like the design needs to stay a particular way, well, it's not the kind of intention of an EPUB, and it's very likely that it's going to look completely different on any end user's device anyway. So reflowable EPUBs are user focused, and that's really what you want to remind your authors and your designers as they're kind of creating these files. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of this in the next couple of slides of how different the final EPUB can look, depending on the settings in a person's account. I'm going to admit. And because of this, because of why we're opting for reflowable here, that's what makes them innately more accessible. Because it's really important to think in terms of what could somebody with a print disability need here. Maybe they need the words spaced out more. Maybe they need the dyslexia font applied. Maybe they need smaller margins because they've got some sort of eye issue that makes it a lot easier for them to look at a smaller amount. Um, because what we're trying to really drill into people's minds is that reflowable really equals customizable. And that's always better when it comes to accessibility. And I would argue, even for able-bodied people, it's just nice to be able to have your favorite font and to be able to use it. So these are a couple of screenshots here. So this is a screenshot of the text as the publisher intended it. And then this is another screenshot of the text with a different font and with it enlarged. And again, it can be swapped into, so I've switched the orientation here. So it's in landscape now, and I've got it zoomed right in, because what if there's smaller text in certain parts and you need to be able to zoom in as much as possible, because, or maybe you're reading from something far away, right? So the idea is that you're giving the reader options so that more people can access the title successfully, is really what it comes down to. So with that being said, I also wanted to go over a few design tips and common errors that I've seen. So as I'm sure many of you know, eBound processes thousands of accessible ePubs a year, and we do QA on a percentage of them. And there's often things that we see coming through that still have kind of errors and don't adhere to best practices, because again, that's the nature of this work, is that the best practices are often changing, and it's difficult to keep up, but there are resources out there that show you what the current best practice is. So I wanted to go over kind of some common things, four of the most common things that I see that I hope I can illustrate what the error is and how to prevent it. So the four areas that I wanted to focus on are these four. So drop caps, alt text missing, incomplete, or inconsistent, inline styling used, and language tagging missing. So we'll go into those individually here. Drop caps. So I love a drop cap. I think it's lovely. Do I need it in my digital book? Probably not. So the kind of Advice is to avoid them entirely. If it's very, very important to your author or your designer or anybody that to have the drop caps, we do want to do them in a different way that is accessible. So essentially what we see a lot is people are splitting the word. So you'll have a span tag around. So if the word drop was what we wanted that drop cap on, they would put a span tag around the D with specific styling there. And as you'll see later when we talk a little bit about styling, that can be an issue because each screen reader has different abilities and interacts with the text differently. So the more stuff, essentially, the more code you put into each line of the document, um, the worse it can be for a screen reader to interpret, and the less likely it is that your message will come across. So I've heard sometimes the screen reader will just pronounce the D and then it would say, so it'd say D drop or something like that. So avoiding stuff like that and knowing, okay, I'm doing something, is this going to be accessible? And then looking it up if you're not sure. And to confirm, the best practice right now for creating drop caps is using CSS. And we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. And there's this first letter pseudo element CSS tag specifically that can be used that has been created to interact with assistive technology properly. And just to review, so assistive technology would be something like Thorium or anything that looks at the text and reads it out loud or interprets it in some way. Okay. Oops, sorry, I went one too far. Okay, alt text and decorative images. So one thing that I see a lot here is that either publishers or editors or whoever is responsible for creating the alt text, sometimes even conversion partners, will kind of pick and choose if something is decorative or not. And it's really important to have a very clear understanding of, is this a decorative image or is it something that requires alt text? So the biggest question that you want to ask is, does the image, does it add to the text, or is it simply, ornamental? Is it something that is the understanding of the image is required to understand the text? If the answer is no, then it is decorative. And you just want to make sure that you're keeping all of them as decorative, because essentially they need to be marked up properly so that the assistive technology knows to jump over it. One other thing that we're seeing a lot with the increase in accessible books is a lot of what Benetech's and the W3C calls overly verbose language. So the general consensus is 150 characters for simple images. And that's characters, that's not words. So anything over that is what you would then go into an extended description for. Um, Anything essentially simple, like covers, logos, and like simple photographs, things like that would be considered fine to describe in 150 characters. Things that need longer extended descriptions are things like maps with a lot of information on it, graphs, charts, maybe sections of a graphic novel and things like that. So concise is the most important thing with alt text, and then consistency with what you're creating alt text for. I hope that that makes sense. Okay. And then inline styling. So this is what I was referring to before. So inline styling is anytime the conversion partner or whomever is creating your EPUB styled some words or maybe an image or a frame or something right on the individual page, as opposed to using CSS, which is where the styles should live. So all styling, even for fixed layouts and things like that, should really be in the CSS, because if it isn't, sometimes the text can't scale properly, meaning it can't go from one size to larger, like I showed you in the screenshots of the page. And again, this is the same thing where if the assistive technology is needing to parse through a bunch of inline styling, it could potentially create issues with the interpretation, right? So you're keeping all of the styles and all of the things that make the words appear the way you want them on the screen in a separate document so that it's not going to interfere with assistive technology. Okay. And then for the last one that is for design, I wanted to actually show a little video because this one is a good one to actually display. Um, so language tagging, out of curiosity, could people say in the chat, have you done language tagging, as in language shifts, for any of your ePubs before? Have you submitted that? You can put a yes or no in the chat. It's totally up to the publisher if they want to do it themselves and mark all of those sections. I think that, yeah, so it depends. Matt says our stuff is mostly just in English, which, yeah, that's totally fine. Mostly English, but occasional French, Peter says. And Richard isn't sure what that is. And I saw Marley, you said no. Your conversion partner is doing the language tagging for you. And if you do your conversions through eBound, that is something that's included because it is quite time consuming if there's a number of shifts. So that's definitely something that you would want to make sure the conversion partner is doing for you. It's not necessarily, so Richard is asking if we're talking about multiple languages. It's not so much that the text is in multiple languages, it's that the code is saying, hey, this is the primary language of the text, and this section of it is switching to another language. So I'm going to show you to illustrate that a little bit better. I've got some videos here that I hope we tested profusely before this. So I'm hoping that they're going to play properly. Oh, and these are just a couple points on that we've talked about here. So why they're important, it's because you'll see in a second that we need them or the pronunciation is nonsensical. Like it won't make sense at all. So here's a example of text that has a switch from English to French, and it's not tagged correctly with the HTML code. So all you're going to see is the actual image of the assistive technology reading it out aloud for you. And then I'll show you, I fixed it and then I upload it again and you'll see the corrected one. So here is incorrect, and please let me know if you can't hear this.
Or, as my mother would say, une place pour chaque chose a grave sa place, that night at home, I pull.
I'm gonna play it again.
As my mother would say, une place pour chaque chose a grave sa place, that night at home, I pull.
So you can see what was happening there. The assistive technology is trying to read this French section as if it's English because it doesn't know that it's a separate language. But if we switch it and we tag it properly, then this is a really good example of the wonders that happen just by a couple of pieces of code.
My mother would say, une place pour chaque chose et chaque chose à sa place. That night at home, I would say, une place pour chaque chose et chaque chose à sa place. That night at home, my mother would say, une place pour chaque chose.
So as you can see there, it actually switched the AT voice out. And when I was experimenting with that, I noticed that depending on the voice that I use, so if I use the British or the Irish or the American voice, it would sometimes pronounce it a little bit closer, a little bit worse. So I don't know entirely what goes into that, but you saw on the second one that it switched the voice entirely into French. So that leads me to believe that in that particular assistive technology, which is thorium, that's what the French voice is programmed as. So with just a couple of pieces of code, it knew to switch into French and it was able to interpret the language properly. The other thing that can happen if you don't do that is if the ePub doesn't know that that is a switch to another language, then it won't be able to look up that word in any dictionaries because it doesn't know. It would be essentially looking for a French word in an English dictionary. So the language shifts are really, really important because if the pronunciation is completely wrong, you don't realize that there's a language shift happening and it just kind of sounds like nonsense, then someone could potentially lose their understanding of the text, especially if they can't look it up. So this should be done for words and phrases that aren't part of the standard vernacular. So anything like cliche or those types of words that are worked into our English language, they don't need to be changed because people will know even if it's not perfectly pronounced. But for words or phrases that aren't a part of the standard English dictionary at this point, they really should be tagged. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat right now, but is anything coming up about those individual features and any questions on the kind of reasons for accessibility or reasons for using those features that way? Let's give you a couple minutes to think. Marley says, for those who get their EPUBs produced through eBound, how can we check languages are tagged properly during proofing? Okay, yeah, so that's a great question. Essentially, you'll have to get comfortable opening the EPUB up in a program called Sigil. So I'm just going to type into the chat here what it's called. Oh, it's commenting as apologize, I'm logged in as Paula Bruce. Apparently, those are not my initials. Pretend those say EC. But Sigil is what you can use to open an EPUB file and just have a quick glance through to get familiar with how things are coded. And then essentially you can just search up one of the alternative language words and just make sure that the specific language is showing there around the word or the phrase. So I can send you some screenshots and we can go over that in more detail at a later date as well. Okay. I kind of feel like I'm back in my teaching days. Like we have a lot to get through, so I'm gonna just keep going then. Okay, so I do want to go over individually the accessible metadata that you should be adding to your accessible reflowable ePubs. But there are going to be some little kind of caveats and jumping off points in this list that I've normally presented for other webinars because we've got some updates coming in from Amazon now that are needing a bit of our attention to make sure that things are flowing through properly. So I always say that this is, if you're going to screenshot anything, screenshot this. This is a list of what I have updated to kind of currently have you covered for EAA standards as well as vendor standards that will be needed to process. So there are a couple of extras in here that weren't there before, so I'll just go back. Anything that's in red is a either or situation. So it's a little bit more complex with some recent updates, but hopefully it'll be clear when we go through it. Okay. So Um, Amazon, this is a warning. It's not an error that's going to cause a failure, but I thought it would be worth bringing up because it is appearing on their vendor page now. So if you're not already supplying the 00 no known hazards from codeless 79, you do want to start supplying that because this will show up right here this is from the Amazon storefront. So this particular book didn't send the hazard information, and that's a publisher call. If you're okay with that, then that's fine. But I think generally speaking, For whatever reason, Amazon has decided that these are the most important pieces of accessibility metadata and what they want to display. So it is probably a good idea to kind of play ball and supply them with those things. And we'll keep going through and I'll highlight some of where the other metadata comes from to populate that part of the Amazon page. So while you're listening, you can also do a quick search of some of your ePubs on Amazon to see if they are appearing with their accessible metadata. Because if they haven't, that's probably because there's another issue that hasn't processed that we'll have to take a look at. Okay, so I think everyone's familiar with the accessibility summary for the most part now. I split all of these into what it refers to and when to use it. And as you'll see, for the most part, it's like use it if you are working with a certified conversion partner or somebody that knows what they're doing and they are confident that they have included these things. So what we're talking about here is the metadata. But this accessible summary should also be added into the ePub file by your conversion partner. So you can write it yourself or you can grab it from inside the ePub file. And the biggest thing is that it should be in human readable language and that you are not just listing out all of the features again, because we've got those listed in the metadata that we're going to explore next. But you are kind of adding any extras. For instance, blank pages are removed, or this is a fixed layout title, so it can't be fully accessible. Things like that, that would help someone assess whether the book is going to meet their needs or not. Okay, so O2 or O3 is the accessibility specification for the ePub standard that was applied when creating the file. So this would be something that you would have to double check with your conversion partner about. Anything being created now should be AA. And you can really just confirm with them, are these ePubs 1.0A or 1.0 AA? But everything should be AA that's being produced anytime in the last few years. Oh, again, that's 2 or 3. So the specification kind of gets updated and changed and made better. So that's why there's kind of different ones there. But anything created in the last few years should be AA. So and again, these are all from Codeless 196. The table of contents navigation refers to the internal table of contents inside the ePub file. So essentially, as long as it's being like, you won't see an ePub that doesn't have an internal table of contents that's created by a conversion partner that knows what they're doing. So again, single logical reading order. I was trying to think of an example of a book that wouldn't have a single logical reading order, and the only thing that I could think of was a choose your own adventure book. I wouldn't include a single logical reading order metadata tag for something like that because there isn't a single logical reading order. You jump around in the text, but essentially, if the book is meant to be read from start to finish, then this is another one that you would add. Okay, this is another either or situation. So 14 would be used for short alternative descriptions. And so again, that's anything that's 150 characters or below. And then 15 would be used full. It should just say like extended. This is the kind of the issue with all Onyx stuff, is that sometimes the language differs slightly and can make it kind of confusing. But full or 15 is used for complex image descriptions, like with textbooks, graphic novels, and things like that. This is one that I learned a little bit more about the other day. So print equivalent page numbering refers to the page breaks and the page numbers that match with the print counterpart. We often see um, the data come back where they're still pointing to the ePub. And you really want to make sure that that the ePub is pointing to the print counterpart, so that if somebody's in a classroom setting, they have print page numbers where they can go to that part of the book, because it's going to be different in a digital book than it is in the print book, right? And one thing that I learned the other day is that there is still a use case, even if the print source is like a PDF or a Word file, you can still use it as the print source. You can put it in there. It doesn't have to be an ISBN, which is what I was thinking and had always assumed it had to be an ISBN. But you can put in, manuscript Word file with the title, if that's the print source. Okay, and then this is the language tagging that we already talked about. So this is kind of referring to two things. The tagging of the actual page is in one language, and then the tagging of the shifts has been marked as well. And again, mentioning that the language shifts are tagged properly is a great thing to add to the accessibility summary. Use of contrast is the one that is referring to the background meeting the proper ratios. So any accessible EPUB should have been checked for this by your conversion partners. And this is really just saying like here how the white is in stark contrast with the black. That would meet the accessible ratios. If you need to test things, I can also send you some color contrast analyzer app suggestions. Next, previous navigation, any EPUB has this really, it's just the function to move forward and backwards with the arrow keys. And any accessible EPUB really should have been checked for this by conversion partners, so you can feel confident adding this one as well. And then same goes for landmark navigation. So this is kind of just a different term for a specific way to navigate in the EPUB. This is usually hidden, but is visible if you're using assistive technology like Thorium. You'll see a place inside kind of the table of contents that says landmarks, and it's a way of quickly navigating through the document. So starting at the start, the very beginning of the book, and then going to maybe the start of content where the actual story or the text begins, and then usually an ability to jump to the very end as well, so that they're not having to navigate manually through each section. Okay, so this is another one that I wasn't really telling people to add before, but it's since Amazon switched to using Onyx 3.1 and processing accessible metadata, this is the one that they're using to populate that top section of their accessible details. So that is this one here, visual adjustments. So if you want it to appear like this, where it says appearance can be modified, as opposed to it saying no information available, then you do need to include 36. All content can be modified to populate visual adjustments on the Amazon storefront. Okay, and these are, as you can tell, these are going in order. So code list 196 doesn't have 196 full options, but it does have quite a few close to it. And so we're just moving through it in order here. So link purposes are clear is just referring to the links, meaning URLs are in a separate color so that they're not just black, and that or the wording is announcing it. So it might say link to website or publisher's website. And you would only use this if you have at least one active link in it. And usually most publishers do have a link to their website somewhere on the copyright page. Okay, so this one, we're getting a little bit more complex here. So 81 or 82, which would be 81 is WCAG v 2.0, 82 is WCAG v 2.1. And the reason I bring these up is because Amazon is now failing things if you don't add both of this one and the next slide in tandem. So essentially everything has to match up. And I'm going to go back to the overarching slide with all of the different metadata in a sec to show you. But essentially, if you have the code that says your EPUB is to a specification of AA, then you also need to have in there that you are using 2.1, and similarly that you're using WCAG level AA. So with these updates and people taking EAA very seriously, your metadata really has to be in order now, and that everything matches up. or they will reject things. And unfortunately, Amazon, with this new update, has started rejecting entire files if there's one error in it, as opposed to just rejecting that one title that has the error. So we really want to make sure things are aligned. Oops, sorry, there's a mosquito in my face, to make sure that that doesn't happen. So again, the biggest thing is that they just all have to match, right? So we want to make sure that if you're using EPUB level AA, that you're also using the WCAG level AA and 2.1. Does that make sense, or is that deeply confusing right now? Again, I can't see the chat, unfortunately.
Nothing in the chat yet.
Okay, I'm going to keep going. So this is what I was just explaining. So again, if you are sending either or, that is going to fail. But if you send both, it will pass. Okay. So people might be wondering, okay, well, why haven't I seen this? So you can only, essentially, you can only get error reports from whatever core source programs into core source to register as an error. And right now I am working with them to hopefully get this looked at, because it really should be, in my opinion, flagging an error if there's a ton of changes that are failing now. And I think that there hadn't been any communication between Amazon and CoreSource about these changes and what would and wouldn't fail. So I think that they're scrambling a little bit to try and get caught up, but I have been tracking everything and reaching out to them very consistently to advocate for eBound customers. So we'll go into that a little bit more, but those last couple of pieces of metadata that we were going over, so the 81 or 82 or 84, 85, that is what's going to populate right here, the conformance metadata. So again, this is very important to be displayed because this is telling the EAA that this title conforms to pretty much the highest standard that you can communicate in Onyx, and that the title should stay up for sale.
We have a question in the chat
Or
from Katrina. Just to clarify, is 82 WCAG 2.2 or 2.1?
it should be I think it's still 2.1 in the metadata on core source. I'd have to double check. I don't know off the top of my head, but the number is correct. So just go with the number if there was a typo in my slide there. Okay. So oh, sorry, was that it? Or was there another one?
That was it.
Okay.
And they say thank you.
Okay, perfect. So the conformance metadata is coming in here, and then the compliance certification. So for anyone that was, or I suppose we should say still is part of the compliance certification through eBound, formerly Benetech, this is where this would come in. So any title that has been certified by the Benetech program previously, you would add this 93 code, and that's what's going to populate that section of Amazon's web front. And if you are essentially anyone that has had their spot check and had it under eBound Digital certified as opposed to Benetech, then you can, moving forward, update to this. So you don't need to change any of the ones that might have referenced Benetech. But once you have your spot check and you're formally under the eBound Digital certified program instead, that's where you would add this metadata and only use that for any title, any reflowable title that goes through the program moving forward. So again, this would only be added to reflowable titles. This shouldn't be on web PDFs or fixed layout titles. This code with the compliance certification tag should only be for reflowable. I'm just going to take a sip of water. Okay. Could you please respond in the chat to yes or no? Because I'm actually going to skip this if it doesn't apply to anyone. Do you have any audiobooks or read-along titles in your catalog where the author and narrator are the same person? So for example, Emma Cote is the attributed author for the book Unrest, and she also recorded the audiobook. So she's the attributed narrator. And similarly, so it's like an and or situation. Emma is the attributed author for a read-along book. So that would be like an EPUB with audio files. And she recorded the audio files herself. Does that apply to anyone? If you can just tell me, Paula, from the chat. If anyone says yes, then we'll go over this.
So far, we have 3 no's.
Okay.
A 4th? No.
Okay. Okay, good. I didn't think so, but I wanted to put it in because this is another new Amazon update that is failing things. So I think we'll just skip that part because we are getting kind of low on time and there's just a few other things I want to get through still. Okay. So as some of you may have heard, when it comes to EAA, there are exemptions to people to publishers that that don't need to worry as much about EAA. So there are codes in Onyx, and we just wanted to touch on them because we didn't want you to see them and think that there was something strange going on or were you supposed to use them. So essentially, there are 3 separate codes that that are classified for EAA exemption. That go under micro enterprises, disproportionate burden, or fundamental alteration. So micro enterprises has to do with the size of the company and the amount of money that it pulls in. Disproportionate burden would mean that it would so for a fixed layout title, let's say it would be too difficult or impossible to make it fully accessible, or that you don't have the staff to do it. And then similarly, fundamental alteration would mean that if you did make it reflowable, it wouldn't really function as it's supposed to anymore. So while those do exist, we haven't had any confirmation about how to qualify your publisher or your business under any of these exemptions. So that's why we don't recommend that you add these, because we don't know what they are expecting as far as registering yourself under these things. So especially if you already have accessible features in the EPUB, there's no point of adding this in, because you want to make sure that the books remain as sellable as possible into as many markets as possible. And as we don't know how vendors kind of interpret and process each piece of metadata, we don't want to add anything that is going to prevent the titles from going up for sale. So while these codes do exist, we don't recommend that you try and use them just yet. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, but what if you know your book isn't accessible and you don't have a way of making it accessible just yet? So perhaps a very old title that you just don't have the funds or the resources or the time to make accessible. So previously we had reported that Kobo was accepting code 08, which is stands for unknown inaccessible, or sorry, unknown accessibility, or code 09 inaccessible. But Amazon is requiring the use of 09. So just to correct ourselves with new information, if a title you know is like an EPUB 2 and it's not accessible, it doesn't have any features, it's not going to be updated, then marking it as 09 inaccessible is the best kind of course of action. So just to conclude there, use 09 if absolutely necessary, but a better plan is to add the features that do exist, because in most cases, even for really old titles, there would likely be at least a table of contents and the next previous navigation, things like that. Okay. Additional Amazon update. So when Amazon updated to they were using Onyx 2 for ages, and then in May, they started accepting Onyx 3. And as a result, as I mentioned before, we're seeing full file failures where, as before, just that one title wouldn't process. So again, unfortunately, this is not being reported by CoreSource. So we do need to ask for publishers to kind of help be our best line of defense there. And when you do a distribution to Amazon, if you made an update, like to the accessible metadata, to maybe you added reviews, maybe you updated some some other information that would appear on store, please let us know if it's not appearing, because we will have to go in and dig in with Amazon in the back end to find what the issue is and match it up to the error in the Onyx file, and then help fix it. So essentially, the issue is that files are coming out of core source not valid in some cases. And if they aren't valid, they're not processing at Amazon, which was not the case previously. So anyone, before you panic, anyone that is using an Onyx provider should have Onyx validation on export, and therefore it should work fine. But if you're using the spreadsheet or you're using the UI to create your metadata, it's possible in the spreadsheet and in the UI to enter some data that gets saved and creates an error without you realizing it. So what we're asking here is just keep an eye on any distributions to Amazon for whether or not they update, so that we can dig in, if need be, into the Amazon backend. Okay, so now, after all that on accessible metadata and updates, where do you put it? So again, directly into core source via the spreadsheet or via an Onyx provider. Core source, it looks like this under the basic information. If you just scroll down inside the ISBN, you should see the product form feature section, and it will allow you to add as many of these different features as you want. And then for the spreadsheet, it is located in these columns here. This is what it looks like. So this is just one screenshot. It goes quite a ways. I think anyone that's used the spreadsheet knows that it moves all the way across. And you can repeat it again as many times as you want, but you do need to keep duplicating the two columns. So when it says repeatable, it's talking about repeating this column and that column and pasting it beside. So again, you can add as many features as you want in the spreadsheet. You just have to make space for them. Okay, so again, if there is any doubt about the backlist, there is a new feature. Oh, sorry, we're going to go over this first. So if you don't currently have a certified conversion partner, the best thing to do is to make sure that you're working with one, because it's their job to stay up to date on all of the changes, and make sure that you kind of have an understanding of this process so that you can do QA in-house when they come back in. And then adding that accessible Onyx metadata should be part of the same workflow as it is to add it in your regular metadata, your marketing metadata. So think of accessible metadata now as marketing metadata. It's all the same, it's all metadata. It's in some cases required, and it's also just really important to display all of those features that you've kind of fought to have included in your ePub. Yeah, and this is the biggest thing, is just continuing to learn and adjusting your workflow as needed. Okay, but there is a tool in core source. I'm almost done, and then we will have a few minutes for questions. So there is a tool in core source that is now launched to, it still involves manual effort, but at least you can pull the reports for multiple titles at a time. So this is Ace by Daisy, which I think most people are familiar with. And it is now available in the core source UI. So to access it, you just need to log into core source. You can select up to 10 titles. I was experimenting with it here, and it did allow me to select all of the different, so 10 titles. There's 13 selected here, but when I went to use the Ace by Daisy button, it said you can only do 10, but it will look at each of the individual asset types. So it'll still try and pull info for things like web PDFs and audiobooks, which is not useful. So it might be better to go kind of one at a time if you are avoiding pulling information for formats that Ace by Daisy can't actually process. So that's another piece of feedback that I've let them know. So once you've selected your 10, you can click on the Ace by Daisy button, and then an email will be sent to your email address with a link, and then you can download, and you'll get a zipped folder. So this is why I selected 10. but there's 16 folders because it's also trying to pull an ACE report for web PDFs and for different formats that are in those title groups. And then it'll show the ISBN, and you can open the report here, and this will show you some of the features that are added in the ePub. Okay, so there's still manual effort. Unfortunately, there's no way to combine the reports all into one HTML page, but at least you can pull multiple at a time, which saves time in the sense of you don't have to open ACE and go searching for the ePub and then create the report and go through in the actual app. This is giving you a link to, when you click on this, it's going to open in your web browser, and you can see you could have all 10 of them open and you could kind of go back and forth. So it's still a manual process, but it's a little bit quicker in my opinion. Okay. And just as a quick reminder, we do this because accessible books are better books for everyone, and also because it's the EAA is happening and we don't know exactly what's going to happen with titles that don't meet the requirements. So accessible metadata opens up that market, keeps you in the market if you're already there. And if those features are present but not listed, you really could miss out on a sale because people might not purchase your title if they don't know that it's accessible. So if you do have backlist titles that need to be remediated and you don't have time to open up ACE reports and try and suss out what's in each of them, then eBound does handle backlist remediation, and we can get you a free quote on doing that as well. So ebooks at eboundcanada.org is still me you will get a hold of, but that is the separate conversion inbox just to keep all of those in another spot. Thank you so much for stopping in today for this webinar. We're always here to answer any additional questions by email, or if you need some kind of additional support, we are happy to help out. So thanks very much, everyone, and we will be in touch again soon.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us today.